Hello, welcome. This is our Saturday live stream. So good to be here. I know I had last week off. I hope you guys had a wonderful week. Today is kind of part two. Remember, what I kind of did last time we talked, I did a little bit of a tribute to my father and life lessons I learned from him. And told you guys I had a bunch more to share. He wrote this book, The 100 Air, that's just a small sampling of the different life lessons and things he's learned on, how to be generous, even if you don't have a lot to give, how to show kindness to others, which in a lot of ways is a continuation to what I do when I'm even working with Darman and doing some of the scripts that I do. So I'm looking kind of shiny here today. So that's what we're going to continue with. And, I wanted to call today's lesson, you can make a difference no matter what your job is. And sometimes, we feel like, oh, I have to be this powerful person. I have to have hundreds of thousands of followers or millions of followers to make a difference. Or I need to be this celebrity or this wealthy philanthropist and all this. And we don't realize that no matter what our job is, we can make a difference in other people's lives. And we forget that. And sometimes we're hard on ourselves thinking we can't make a difference. But there's little things we do that can make a huge difference in someone's life, and we may not even know it. So thank you for joining me today, for always wanting to be here. And let's get started. So I don't know if any of you guys know, but my dad was a house painter. I don't think that's something he dreamed about being, that he set out wanting to be, or I don't think that was part of his life plan. I mean, when he went to college and he went to Bible school, he was preaching. He was going to different places and he was preaching, and he had this job at Golden Valley Lutheran College where that's right. Nong says, I don't think it makes a difference. And I'm not a public figure. Yeah. He had a job recruiting people into this Bible college, Lutheran Valley Bible College. And he did that for a while, but then he had a life change. And sometimes when we have a change in life, we want to do things differently.
Hey guys.
Looks like my son Timothy wants to say hi.
Hey.
His big smile on your face.
Yeah. I want to go to Joe's after you live stream, okay, Mom?
You want to go to Trader Joe's after the live stream? Okay, we can probably arrange that. You want to get some snacks?
Yeah, I want to get the everything but the bagel. The the season one, but I want the remember the green packets.
Okay, you can show me when we get there.
I forgot to buy them last time.
Okay.
Hi guys. So I'm not gonna tell you about video games.
Okay.
I'm taking a long break from Hell Enable for a while because
if you want to talk to people, they have to see you.
Oh yeah, I'm taking a break from Hell Enable for a while because number one, my busy PC sucks at winning games. I can only win like some games, but that's number two. I'm stuck on a MacBook, so I can't get a new PC until 2018.
He's got video game brain.
And half video game brain, half Christian brain. So, and yes, with Clutchy About episode 2, I might work on the script today, and we might see it next week. So
he normally does gaming on Saturdays, but Dad can't remember where he hid his computer. Because sometimes when he gets too addicted, we have to hide it for a little bit. But now Dad can't remember where he hid it.
That's painful. But that doesn't matter. Anyways, I've been Timothy Nolan, and I'll see you on the next live stream.
So if you want to follow Timothy Norland's YouTube page, it is
Timothy Norland.
Timothy Norland. So same last name as mine, and the name Timothy.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Thanks for joining us.
Bye. No sponsors today, by the way. So
I think some of the new people don't even remember your little sponsor shtick. He used to come when I first started doing live streams the first couple of years, like 3-4 years ago, he would come interrupt every live stream with some snack food. And he would talk about this snack food, and then he'd be like, sponsored by, and then I'd be like, not sponsored. It was like a running gag.
Yeah, I was about to say
that we
that.
had. But yeah. All right. Thanks for joining.
Yeah.
Go do something productive, okay?
So, guys.
Okay. Bye. And close my door.
Also, I think a new Stone film's coming out today. I'm not sure though. So, uh,
Okay. Okay.
is it raining, Mom, or not?
Is what ready?
Raining. Is it raining outside?
Go open the door and take a look.
See you guys. Stone film coming out very soon, I think. Twinkle the Super Boys.
Okay.
Bye,
Okay.
y'all.
Okay. So that was one of my sons. I have two.
Yeah, that's playing on the iPad right now.
That's okay. That's okay. So this is kind of like a tribute to my dad. So that's what I was going to do today. So for those of you who don't know, I almost said I lost my father a month ago, but he's not lost. I know right where he is. He's in heaven. He's with God and the angels, and he's not in pain anymore. He's got all of his energy back. He's walking, he's doing all the things, and he's reunited with his parents and his first wife and his child. If you were on last time, I think I talked about this. But before I was even a twinkle in my dad's eye, before he met my mom, he was married to another lady, and um, she was 9 months pregnant with my dad's child, and they were driving in a little VW bug when a gravel truck ran a stop sign, killed my dad's wife and baby, and my dad almost lost his life too. They were like, I think the steering wheel like crushed his ribs and punctured his lungs, and he woke up in the emergency room and they were sewing his neck back together. And the doctor said, "I'm sorry, son, we weren't able to save your wife and baby." And that's when my dad quoted the book of Job and said, "The Lord giveth, the Lord taketh away. Blessed be the name of the Lord." And that's one of the things we're going to talk about today is, how do you find joy in terrible situations? Is that even possible? So I think after that, my dad stopped wanting to go around and preach. I think he really turned inward. He was still outgoing. He'd still go to coffee with his buddies and tell stories, but I think he just lost that thing of wanting to preach, and he started painting houses. And who knew that was going to turn into like a 50-year long career? So he writes in his book, The Hundred Air, about the cheerful paintbrush. And it's basically, an artist can make a beautiful painting. My dad made the world a more beautiful place just by, scraping off, peeling paint off of houses and priming it and painting it. He made the world a little more beautiful place, or at least the city of St. Peter, right? St. Peter, Minnesota, he made a little more beautiful. Thank you, Miss KD. Um, so you may have some gifts and talents. Thank you so much, Nicola, that you think, "Oh, this is my job is nothing. I just fix cars, or I just do whatever." And just because like an artist can make something beautiful, or a sculptor can make something gorgeous out of stone, if you consider that you have a talent inside you, whatever that talent it is, you know, if it's a talent fixing instruments or whatever it is, you can use that talent to help others, right? Not just help them, but thank you, 9 o'clock, to to cheer them up, right? So there was a period of time where my dad used to work at a lumber store. So for those of you who don't know what that is, that's a place where you can like buy wood to build a fence or whatever you need wood for. And it was just a menial manual labor job. And but he always had the most cheerful attitude. And you could walk into that store and you would be met with just the most pleasant smile, a cheery hello. And that's something we can do too. No matter where we work or what we do, we can be pleasant to approach. Even if we're not a painter or a sculptor, we can paint the world a better place, making it happier, changing the attitude in another person. So whatever that talent is of yours. So many times people would come into the lumber yard, into the lumber store, and and they would just have this down look on their face. I mean, going to a lumber store is not something to be happy about, right? That might mean that something broke and you need to fix it, like our fence that's falling down. We have to fix our fence. We need to go get wood to fix our fence. But he would see people walking in and looking sad, and then my dad would put this great big smile on his face and say, "What a grand day today." And they kind of look at him like, "What are you talking about? You're selling wood." And he would say that, but immediately, like when you say something nice, like, "Isn't the weather beautiful today? Oh, isn't this rain lovely? We really needed this." You know, a lot of times the look on people's faces would change. They would perk up or they would smile and say something back. And sometimes marvelous things would happen in this exchange. They would leave the store feeling lighter, feeling brighter, feeling, they leave, even if they came in frowning, they'd leave smiling, right? So that's kind of our service. That's what we can do. You may be in a place where you feel like you have nothing to give. You're like, I don't have all this money to give to a charity. I don't have, whatever donations to give. I don't have time to volunteer at whatever because I'm working 2 jobs. Whatever it is, you can offer a smile. You can offer a word of encouragement. You can, hold the door open for someone who crosses your path. You can do these small, little kind gestures. So your attitude is your paintbrush. That's how you paint the world. The world is your canvas by the effect you have on people. So your smile can brighten another person's day. So these small gestures you can do carry this weight. You can lift the drooping shoulders of someone and bring them hope when they're struggling. So whatever your job is, it can be a platform to impact others' lives. You don't need to be rich and famous or be in a helping position. Like you don't even need to be a nurse or somebody to make a difference wherever you are. So, how many people, like reflect on this, how many people cross your path each day that carry invisible burdens? I think it's more than you can imagine. How many times have you gone out and about and you're carrying some heavy, heavy weight and nobody knows about it? And you just want somebody to be kind to you that day. Maybe they don't know that you just lost your job, or your spouse just betrayed you, or a friend was talking behind your back, or somebody close to you passed away. We all walk around carrying invisible burdens, and sometimes we really need a smile, a kind word. That kind word you give may be the only encouragement that person gets all week. And my dad saw this. He writes about this in his book, The 100 Air, which you can find on Amazon. He looks at this as part of his Christian duty. It's part of his calling to bring sunshine to others' lives, not by preaching to them, but just by having kindness. Thank you for being here, Mona. Angela, I see you. Um, so now listen, I know things aren't always great in our lives, but if we walk around moping all the time or in a bad mood, why would anyone want to know more about the God we say we serve? Well, we say we believe in God, but if we walk around looking miserable all the time, even if something bad happens to us, if we walk around looking miserable all the time, why would anyone want to know about the God we serve? And do you know it's actually commanded in the Bible for us to have joy? Yeah, Philippians 4:4 says, "Rejoice in the Lord always. Again, I say rejoice." It doesn't say rejoice in the Lord when everything's going your way. Rejoice in the Lord when you get what you want. Rejoice in the Lord when you have enough money to pay your bills. It says rejoice in the Lord always. And again, I say rejoice. Sometimes that's not easy to do, but that's like we are commanded to have joy. And we can do that even when things aren't going our way. It doesn't mean we're happy about the negative circumstances that are going on in our life, but it means we have joy knowing that something greater is beyond this, knowing that the God we serve can turn it all around for you. good things can still come out of bad situations, right? God can turn it around and make it something good. And James 1, 2 through 4 in the scripture takes it even further beyond rejoicing in the Lord. It says, my brethren, count it all joy when you fall into various trials. Who's like being like, oh, yay, I'm so joyful that this awful thing just happened? Probably nobody. But he's saying, count it all joy when you fall into trials. Why? Because something good is going to turn out from it. It says, knowing that the testing of your faith produces patience. How many of you feel like when something bad happens, ooh, this is testing my faith? Like, I don't even know if I want to believe in God anymore because of this bad thing happened. It's testing your faith, and that's producing patience in you. Well, what's the big deal with patience? Like, why does patience matter? Well, because it says patience has its perfect work in you. So patience is working on you. Why? That you may be perfect and complete. When you have the patience working on you, when this thing that you're going through is trying and testing your faith, you become perfect and complete. Like, we're not going to be perfect, but you become complete in the way that you don't lack anything. You have everything within you to know everything's going to be okay, where you realize all things work together for good for those who love God and who are called according to his purpose. So we're supposed to rejoice even when we're going through hard times. So you could turn an ordinary interaction at the grocery store into something that lifts other spirits. Like, what would happen if we all lived this way? What difference would it make in the world? Like, when I used to work at McDonald's for 4 years, when I was a teenager, um, there was this elderly couple that would come in, and they were a poor elderly couple, and they would come in and they would split one of those tiny little hamburgers and a small fry. And every time they would come, I would get such joy cheering them up and talking to them. I would every week I would memorize a new poem, and when they came in once a week on Fridays, I would recite this poem to them, whatever it was, and it would just lift their spirits. But and it was the highlight of their week, but it was also the highlight of my week, right? Donald is saying, yes, I like my job as a detailer because it's something I enjoy. It's like being an artist, taking a car that's dirty and making it beautiful again. Yeah, what can you do to return a smile to someone's face? Another thing my mom used to do is that she would take me in my little dance costumes. I was in dance classes for 10 years. And she would have me go dance at the nursing home for the elderly people to put a smile on their face. Another thing she would do is, like, maybe once a month, she would take her little dog, our dog Molly, to the nursing home and just let the old people hold her and pet her because they're so lonely. They don't get a lot of visitors. So these are just a couple ideas of, like, think about what can you do to put a smile on somebody's face? Can you bake your neighbor cookies? Can you ask an elderly neighbor if you can just mow their lawn for free? What can you do to put a smile on someone's face? And here's one of the things that really, um, that I think can really make a difference. I've found when you're sad, when you're down, when you're depressed, when you're feeling not good, if you can even temporarily say, I'm just going to do this, put your feelings aside for a moment and help someone else. Help lift someone else's spirits. Help pull someone else out of a funk. When I have done that, like, there's been times where I was so down and depressed, and then somebody called me and I didn't want to answer, but I was like, oh, I better answer. And this person, I didn't share that I was going through a tough time. They started sharing about a tough time they're going through. And something rose up within me. And I gave them words of encouragement. And they felt so uplifted afterwards. And when I hung up the phone with them, it was like I wasn't sad anymore. I wasn't down anymore. I realized I had the power within me to help lift up another person. And that's something we can all do. So be intentional with your presence. Let people leave lighter when they came to you. If people leave your presence and feel worse, because you've been negative, you've not believed in them, you've talked about only negative things, that's not what we need more of in the world. And don't underestimate the power of a small kindness. Saying hello, noticing something about someone can be a lifeline. It can open the door for someone. Helping someone get something off a high shelf, or just telling them they look nice today. Adopt a mission of cheering others up as part of your daily mindset. Whatever your job, whatever the setting, you can choose to brighten someone's day. So here's a challenge for you. Would you be willing to brighten someone's day whenever you can, choosing to do that every day? So, like, here's the challenge. Whenever you go to, say, the grocery store or school or work, make it a point not to go home until you've said 3 nice things to somebody. Could you do that? It may be difficult at first, but you may find yourself like, it's going to make your day feel better. It's not only going to make their day feel better, it's going to make your day feel better. So when you go out in public, don't go home till you've said 3 nice things to people, or to 3 different people, right? It's not hard to go to tell the cashier, you have a really nice smile, or thank you for being so good at your job, or seeing someone at school saying, hey, cool shoes, or nice haircut, or you see someone out and about at work like, hey, I like your style, or you've got a great laugh, or there's something really kind about your demeanor, or that jacket really suits you, that color looks amazing on you, or I like your energy, it's so refreshing. Whatever it is, going out of your way to look for ways to cheer others up, that will in turn also side effect. If we want side effects, this is a good side effect. It will cheer you up too. So that's like a nice thing that my dad used to make it a point of doing. But there's also some stories in his book, The 100 Air, which you can find on Amazon, which are very, I would say, unconventional as far as um, helping others out. So the book, The 100 Air, is all about generosity and kindness and helping others. So this, I don't know if this would be something I would recommend doing today, but I'm going to tell you a story. This is a true story uh, about my dad's grandpa, my great grandpa, John. So he formed this group called the Holiday Association, and their whole mission was to stand against injustice. So just like I'm teaching you what I learned from my dad, well, he learned from his dad, and he learned from his dad. Like, we pass these things down. So when I learned about my grandpa John, my dad's grandpa John, my great grandpa, I had never met him. But I used to hear all kinds of stories about him in various ways in the book, and then just other stories my dad had written that I haven't published yet. So anyway, they used to live on a farm, and this was back in the days before tractors. So farming was really hard. I mean, I think it probably still is, but back then it was done by horses, not tractors. So, the hard work of having like a horse pull behind them the stuff to tear up the soil and plant the seeds and stuff. So we decide what gets passed down from generation to generation, whether we're passing down kindness or anger or greediness or selfishness, right? So listen to this. Even if you came from a long line of jerks, or a long line of drunks, or violent people, or cheats, you can decide right now that stops with you. You can stop that generational curse. You can change how things go from now on, and you don't have to perpetuate it. You know, I love the quote I heard once that said, you don't have to come from a good family to have a good family come from you, right? So you can be the one that draws the line in the sand and says, no more. I don't care that uh, my dad abused me, that my mom neglected me, or whatever, generation to generation. I'm going to not do that anymore. So, this is a true story that involved my great grandpa John, not a conventional story of bringing cheer and helping others. This version of helping others was more like I would call the holiday association good deed gangsters. Like, you'll hear more. So at this time in my great grandpa John's life, there was an economic downturn. Throughout history, maybe you've heard about this, it was called the Great Depression. So, um, my grandpa and great grandpa John, they were able to survive because they were able to make extra money grading the township roads. So this contract they got required them to grade the roads from Bernadotte all the way to New Ulm. This is in Minnesota, which was 18 miles away. And the grading was done with two horses. Imagine how they make streets and highways now. Well, this was done with two horses pulling a primitive metal grader through a system of wheel clogs. There was nothing was done hydraulically. It took a long time to grade 18 miles of road. And farming back then, as I mentioned, was a laborious task. And during the Great Depression, you didn't really even make a living at it. Farmers would work from day and to night to make ends meet, but there was never enough slack in the middle. The cost of production ended up being more than the farmers were being paid to produce the stuff. If it cost $50 a pound to raise a hog from birth to butcher, farmers should have been paid double that, right? To get some profit out of it. But the trouble was at the time, they weren't even getting half the amount it took to raise the hog. So they were getting, let's say, $25 a pound, even though it was costing them $50 a pound to raise the calf, if that makes sense. Okay, so if you got sick, or if your spouse died, you would lose the farm because you couldn't pay the land taxes, right? You may have owned the land, but the government, they collect taxes every single year. And when the taxes couldn't be paid, the bankers at some bankers at that time in history were pretty shady. I'm sure you guys could argue that there's some pretty shady bankers now, perhaps, right? So some bankers at that time in history set out to buy the overdue mortgages just for the price of the unpaid land taxes. So get this. So you have all these acres of land, this whole farm. Maybe it cost you, I'm just going to make up a number, back then, $100,000. Well, they may owe $200 in taxes. And these shady bankers, because they couldn't pay their tax, they would go and buy all those acres of land, the $100,000 worth, for $200. So these people were getting their whole farms and livelihoods and everything stripped out from under them just based on not being able to pay the taxes. And they would get seized in what was called sheriff auctions. So the bankers owned the mortgages, and they sent their counterparts out to the land to take the land and the farms away from the widows and the poor people for just pennies on the dollar, right? And that included like the eggs, the poultry, the animals, the grain, anything of value. So then the farmers had no way of making a living, let alone paying their taxes. So, how does my great grandfather John fit into this as the good deed gangster, as I will call him? Well, it was during this period of time that my dad's grandfather rose like an Old Testament prophet to set the injustice right, right? To settle the matters straight and not let any destitute widows lose their land. So I'm told, like many other like minded leaders across the nation, that they were doing the same type of thing. So, what my great grandpa John did is he gathered 100 men and they decided to fight against the corruption, the evil, and the sheriff's auctions. And John's men would go to these land seizures, calling themselves the Holiday Association. And it was at these auctions that the widow ladies would lose their farms because they couldn't pay the land tax. So great grandpa John and his men, they would like stealthily um, move up upon the banker's lackey, right? They'd see the banker's lackey, and a couple men on either side of him in a low, hushed voice would say, "If you bid on this farm, you will never see the light of day again." They were literally threatening them. Now, I don't know if they would have followed through on any of these threats. That's why I'm calling them like the good deed gangsters. John, so they would like threaten them, say, "You're never going to see the light of day again if you bid on this farm." And he had 100 men with him. So two big guys on either side, and the banker lackey, they're not fighters. They would get so scared they wouldn't bid. And then John's men, they were plants, and 1 penny at a time they would bid, and they would be able to buy back the poor widow's land for maybe 10 or 15 cents and give it back to the farmers who had no money for the taxes. And the auctioneer, he went along with it. Like, he knew what the bankers were doing wasn't right, that the farmers didn't have the money for the taxes. So he went along with their scheme to defeat the evil bankers at the time. And even the law enforcement, like, they knew it was happening, but they looked the other way, right? You still hear about some of this happening in today's day and age. Sometimes maybe you've heard, like, sometimes when a child abuser goes to jail, sometimes the sheriffs and, the wardens, they turn the other way when other men in jail want to beat up the child abuser. We're like, we don't see that happening because, just the idea of someone hurting a child, right? So back in that day, law enforcement looked the other way, especially because of these, like, great grandpa John. He had 100 men looking for a fight. But the truth is, they just wanted justice for the poor widows, to not be broke, not be homeless, not be destitute. They wanted to do what was right, even if it seemed like an odd way of doing it. So that's just one of the stories in the 100 Air on Amazon, my dad's book that he wrote. He loved sharing stories that would help people learn how to help people, right? Kind of like what I do on Darman now. We tell stories that inspire you to help other people. So you decide what gets passed down in your family, your character, your integrity, your courage. That can be inherited, but so can dysfunction, right? Because each generation chooses what to continue and what to break. And sometimes injustice does require the courage to confront. Even when it's scary, sometimes you have to confront people. So, like during the Great Depression, my great grandpa John and his 100 men, they risked their lives to stop banks from stealing farms from the poor widows and families. So, you know, to be a true leader, you know, you defend the vulnerable, you protect those with no power or no voice. So, this is what my dad learned from his father, and I learned it from him. And, as I mentioned, that's how values are passed down. And you can be the one that changes the history of your family. And it takes grit to stand up when you know this could cost you something, right? The people that come forward nowadays and speak their minds in a scary world, you might not just get canceled. You could get shot, right? Nowadays, it seems like, just for speaking what you feel is your opinion or your truth. And it was interesting. I heard somebody say a couple weeks ago, I was watching a video about someone was saying that we've lost the ability to tell the difference from hate speech to speech we hate. So just because someone is speaking something we totally disagree with doesn't mean it's hate speech. It might just be speech that we hate. Something to think about, whatever your feeling is on that. But you get to decide what you pass down to your family. So defend the defenseless. Use your voice, use your presence, have courage for those in society who would be exploited or disregarded, right? Lead with conviction and courage, even if it costs you your reputation or your safety. Comfort those, do what's right. And you don't have to carry forward the brokenness of your past. You can choose to leave a legacy of courage instead. So, on a lighter note, my dad has a story in here called Joe Bunker's Dream. So, Joe Bunker, I'll tell you about him. This is a story about Joe Bunker. Now, he was a rich guy. He lived on a hill overlooking the Minnesota River, 2 miles from Rock Point, Minnesota. And Joe had a really big house. It was green. Well, I guess not. In today's standards, maybe it wasn't a big house. It was 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, 2 fireplaces, though. He had a rec room with a huge pool table, a drive-in garage. Well, back in my dad's day, that was a rich house. We look at it now and we're like, oh, that's not a rich house. But a drive-in garage under the house, room for 2 cars, and he had an assortment of lawnmowers, all the equipment. Wasn't bad. Maybe it was low key, but he was a millionaire, even though he is low key. He didn't necessarily let people know about it. Well, he had this pool table, didn't get used a lot because he didn't really have any friends, and all his furniture and appliances, they were expensive. This was back in the late 50s. He made a lot of money raising poultry. He invested wisely. So now he's about 70 years old. He's alone, he's unhappy, he's failing in health, and his unfortunately his wife had run away with a traveling salesman about 30 years earlier. He had 2 kids, but they were grown up, married. They had moved to the West Coast, and they rarely kept in touch with their dad. So, he when he had when he was younger and he had all his energy, he, instead of like focusing on his family life, he was focused on making money. He didn't have time for family and friends. And, so now he is older and doesn't have friends, and he's towards the end of his life. So he late one night fell asleep in his big winged armchair, and he went into this dream, and this dream seemed so real. He thought like he heard the rustle of angels' wings. And this glowing like countenance appeared. What probably was an angel appeared, a feminine, and wore a translucent robe. And the angel said to Joe, I'm going to take you on a journey to see heaven and hell. And the angel took Joe by the arm, and what seemed like a few seconds, they were at the gates of hell. And as far as the eye could see, there were multitudes and multitudes of people are seated at round tables. There were about 10 people seated at each of these round banquet tables, and each of them had a huge pot of hot stew in the middle. And the people in hell, they were so thin, they were malnourished, they were unhappy. There was much complaining. They were spilling food everywhere, and each person had a spoon that had a 4-foot long handle. A really, really, really long spoon. The handles were so long that people were bumping into each other trying to feed this stuff. They couldn't get the spoons into their mouths, and they were hitting each other and fighting with each other trying to get the soup. And the soup would fall off the spoon because the handle was so long, and they couldn't get the nourishment to their mouths. And they tried stretching their arms out as far as possible, and they tried to like bend their heads in the spoons backwards that try to get some food in their mouth. And they were frustrated and they were hungry because their arms would never be long enough to successfully feed and nourish themselves with spoons this long. You're thinking, well, I guess that's what hell is. It's this torture. You're never going to be satisfied, right? You're always going to be hungry. You're always going to be lacking. Well, what happened next was the angel took Joe to heaven. And there were equal numbers of multitudes of people, and they had the identical tables. This is the dream he had. And they had the identical stew. In the middle of each round table was a big pot of stew, and the spoons were exactly the same. They were 4 feet long. And when Joe noticed this, he's seeing this in his dream as the angel is taking him from heaven to hell. But here, there was no soup spilled on the table. People in heaven seemed happy and well nourished, and they were in complete peace. And Joe is saying to the angel, I don't understand. Here at heaven's banquet tables, everyone seems happy. Everyone seems at peace. They seem satisfied, full. But back in hell, everyone was so miserable. Ah, Joe, the angel said with a smile. Here in heaven, they have learned to feed each other. So he awoke from this dream startled because he was like Ebenezer Scrooge, right? He was greedy. He kept everything to himself. And it was almost like the ghost of Christmas past of yesterday showed him this. He had a glimpse of tomorrow through some eternal truths that were shown to him by the angel. And now Joe had the opportunity for the rest of his life, instead of trying to put the long spoon towards him, he held the spoon out to others. And that's something we can do. Listen, if the spoon is too long for you, how about feeding your neighbor? How about feeding others? And they in turn can feed you. And that's the kind of community we are supposed to develop with each other. We're not on earth just for ourselves. We're on earth to help others create a more beautiful place and to rely and count on others, not to have it be all about us, right? Selfishness starves. Service satisfies. Both heaven and hell had the same spoons, the same food. The difference was whether the people were trying to feed themselves or whether they were trying to feed each other. You know, when you have wealth, but you don't have relationships, it's empty. And Joe had spent his life chasing money, but at the end, he was lonely and sick and estranged from family. And it's never too late to turn your spoon outward, right? So don't be like Scrooge, right? Be learning from Joe's dream, you know. How do we live? Are we living like people in hell, grasping, frustrated, trying to fill ourselves when the answer is right in front of us, and that's to serve others? So this story isn't just about eternity, it's about right now, because heaven on earth begins when we turn outward. And Joe's story, it challenges me too, right? Am I investing more in money, in things, or am I investing in people and purpose? That's why I do these live streams each week. This is me doing my thing to hold the spoon outwards, to feed you with a little love, a little kindness, a little, sharing from my heart, what might be helpful to you, what might uplift you, so that you can also learn to turn your spoon outward. Today, this is our chance. We can look for one person today to feed with kindness, to feed with time, to feed with help. Don't measure your life by your possessions, but measure it by the number of people that you have lifted. And don't wait, like Joe did, for the regrets to pile up to start giving. Life is too short to only spend it on yourself. You agree? So there was another story in my dad's book, The Hundred Heir, memoir of generosity from the house painter next door. I helped him write this about Mitzi Gingle. That's a funny name, but that's a true story of a gal that grew up in my dad's town. Now, Ted Gingle owned the local gas station in the small town my dad grew up in. And my dad was just a kid when he came to know Mitzi. And later in life, he wrote this story about Mitzi Gingles. He was reflecting on her. I kind of described her as the 600-pound life coach, if you can imagine. So Ted's daughter, Mitzi, she weighed 600 pounds, and everybody in town knew it because once a month, she would waddle up to Rainier's truck scale and because there was no scales that could measure her weight. So she would go to a truck scale. And my dad got to know Mitzi because he worked in his father's general store. I told you my dad's life was kind of like a cross between Little House on the Prairie, if you've ever heard of that show, and Prairie Home Companion. So my dad worked at the general store, and he said each morning about 9 o'clock in the morning, Mitzi would walk the 1 block from her home to my dad and grandpa's general store. And he said, people would comment on her walking down the street that some would say she looked like a drunken sailor with sea legs because she swayed from side to side like a great ship, going against the waves. And she would buy the same thing every day she came to the store. Every morning she'd buy 2 packages of sweet rolls, 1 quart of homogenized milk, and she would then go home and she would sit by the open window facing the alley near the empty lots. And kids all day long, but mostly in the evenings, young boys and girls would come to her window, sometimes to play cards with her, but mostly the young people would come to her and ask her for advice. She was like one of those ancient seers, she would have this wisdom. So Mitzi was 29 years old and she knew about the ways of the world. So, middle school kids, high school kids, they would feel free to like ask her about boy girl relationships, and boys would get advice on how to talk to a girl. Girls would get advice on whether a boy liked them or not. And she would relay information on who had a crush on what boy and what girl. And with Mitzi, no subject was, um, it's not off limits. You could talk to her about anything. But then like this big event took place in town, and and Mitzi became under the doctor's care, and the doctor said, "You have to lose weight." So he placed her on a special diet, and she spent some time in the New Ulm Union Hospital getting acclimated to her new way of eating. Well, in 2 or 3 years, she had dropped about 160 pounds. And now, as you could say, she looked as good as could be expected. Um, Farm boys weren't beating down the path to marry her or anything, but she was finally able to like be able to stand on her feet long enough to get a job. And my dad was saying when he heard about this as a young boy, he thought, oh no, this job is never going to work for her because she got a job at John's Bar and Grill. Well, it was a 2-3 joint. So that meant that was like whatever, you could only sell a certain type of liquor. But anyway, the long hours at the bar, she had ample opportunity to nibble on like the greasy food, right? That they served, kind of food they serve at bars, right? Everything's like deep fried. Well, it didn't take long of Mitzi being at this job and she ballooned back to her old weight. And unfortunately, she had a heart attack and died in her late 30s. And my dad was really struck by the insensitivity, um, of how people treated her death that took place. Two newspaper men were sent out from a nearby town to cover the funeral. And in the articles, they told in detail how a special coffin had to be made to contain her great weight. The coffin was too big to fit in the hearse. And so a flatbed truck had to be borrowed you know, to contain her weight and take her. Um, and the paper was saying, all these negative things. Oh, it took 10 strong men to even lift the coffin. And she was wearing bright red lipstick and her deceased mom's fake pearls. And she was wearing this large flower print dress. And it was made out of, back in those days, you would make clothes out of flour sacks. Like you would buy flour for baking and they would put nice print on the flour sacks because they knew people were so poor back then. They would literally take the sacks of flowers and sew them into dresses. And it was many, many, many years, maybe decades, when Mitzi was gone. My dad told me this story, and there was a poem he read by Mary Carolyn Davies, and he said, every time I read that poem, I always thought of Mitzi Gingle. And the poem went like this. It's called If I Had Known. And I want you to think about this because there may be people in your life that are struggling beyond what you could imagine having struggles with. And the poem goes like this: If I had known the trouble you were bearing, what griefs were in the silence of your face, I would have been more gentle and more caring, and would have tried to give gladness for your space. I would have brought more warmth into the place if I had known. If I had known what thoughts despairing drew you, why do we never try to understand? I would have lent a little friendship to you and slipped my hand within your hand and made your stay more pleasant in the land if I had known. Everyone carries these unseen burdens. Mitzi looked like the 600-pound girl on the scale, but she was a counselor. She was a friend. She was a source of wisdom for youth. And unfortunately, cruelty, being mean to others, often outlives kindness. The insensitivity at her funeral showed how society reduces people to their flaws instead of honoring their lives. Right? How many times does someone die and people want to point out, yeah, but they were this and they were that, and we didn't like this about them. Instead of honoring the good parts, right? We all have good parts. Yes, we all have flaws. We all have negative things. But how about honoring who they were as a person, right? So kindness shouldn't be denied. You know, we should have compassion and gentleness to people, not just after they're gone, but while they're still here. I mean, how many people around us are silently carrying griefs and struggles that we don't see? Mitzi was laughed at by many, but yet kids went to her for advice. That tells us that something of value, it isn't in the appearances, but it's in our presence. The tragedy wasn't just her death, but that the world seemed more eager to mock her than to comfort her, right? And the poem asks us, will we wait until it's too late to show care? Can you think to someone in your life that maybe you've been a little hard on? Maybe you've been a little judgmental towards? Maybe they even did something to wrong you. Can you show forgiveness? Have you never wronged somebody else? Have you never done something that hurt someone else's feelings? Look beyond the surface. The person others ridicule may carry a great gift inside them. Look beyond how the world looks at people, right? When someone passes, remember them for their humanity, not for their hardships or not for the things that they didn't like. So I'll leave you with one last story. So in the 100 Air, there's something I titled Sufficiency. It's not about the money. And this is more of a fun story. So this perhaps is a made up story, but it's got a great point. So once upon a time, there was a wealthy Texas rancher who threw a huge party at his ranch, and people came from near and far. There were business associates, neighbors, rich and poor, plus your odd assortments of artists and politicians. And at the height of this gala barbecue, the rich cattle baron said he had something to show his guests. And he led the party out behind one of his huge barns, and there he showed all the assembled people a well lit, Olympic sized swimming pool. And he said, I have a standing order to issue a check for $100,000 to anyone who can swim across this pool. The catch was the pool was filled with alligators. So there was these large aquatic reptiles that looked mean and hungry. And then suddenly, at the far end of the pool, there was a tremendous splash, and an impetuous young man was swimming for his life. And the alligators turned and they surged towards the young man. He was swimming with remarkable speed, and he turned and he dodged snapping, angry alligator's teeth. One seized him by his lower pant leg, and he was able to like kick him off. And he kicked him away, and he was barely made it to the far end of the pool when the sympathetic hands reached down and like yanked him, helped pull him out of the pool before the mean critters got to him. Surprisingly, he still had all of his arms and legs. And of course, he was lucky to be alive. And so the old rancher was just like in shock. And he said, "Son, that was some incredible swimming. It's worth to me to witness such an astounding fast action. How would you like that money? I can give you cash, write out a check, or give you cattle options." And the young man, he was still shaking and sputtering. And when he could finally get some words out, he said, "All I want to know is who pushed me." He didn't jump into the pool voluntarily, right? So, what was my dad's point to this story? This story had four basic elements of illustration, right? First, there is the unknown risk, right? There is then the push into dangerous waters of life, the push into danger. But then finally, there's a fantastic reward. And, it's not just my dad's book, The 100 Air, on Amazon, but like read the Bible. That's filled with stories where people are pushed into the dangerous waters of life. Besides it being a guide for living, it says a lot of things about giving, about trusting, about rewards. There will always be a risk. When we go after something that we want, there's always going to be risk. There are whatever the alligators of life are to you, right? There's obligations. We sometimes we just want to do fun things before paying the bills, right? We want to like spend our money on fun things and not just have to give it all to the bill collectors. Of course, there's fear in giving sometimes. There's fear in investing and saving and being able to just live off of what's left. However, if you can successfully navigate the swimming pool of life and its alligators, the rewards can be incredible. And you know what? The Lord promises that He will open up the floodgates of heaven, right? If you are a tither, that's someone who gives like 10% of their paychecks to help the poor, to help the church. The Bible promises it will open up the floodgates of heaven and pour out such a great blessing that you won't even have room enough to contain it. And that's what we get when we're obedient in life, and my dad was proof that you can give money away and still have more than enough to meet all of your needs. Growing up, even though I grew up in a trailer park, we never had our lights turned off. We never were without food. We always had electricity. We always had what we needed. And my dad was always a giver. We may not have been living rich, but we always had more than enough. And when you can learn that it's possible to have joy in giving to others sacrificially and trusting God to help you live off of what's left, it can be joyous. Putting God first in your life is beyond, just having a wholesome discipline. And be gentle with yourself and love yourself. It's a cruel world. So you need to be kind to yourself. And sometimes in life, we only find out what we're capable of when we get pushed into the deep end. That's why I have a life coach and a business coach. I just got back from a 3-day mastermind with my business coach. Sometimes coaches will push you to do things you don't feel ready for, that you don't feel capable of. And they do that for our own good, right? Sometimes we need that push, or we would never volunteer to go into the alligator pool, right? I don't know what your thing is or your fear is. Maybe it's fear to go sing a song in the choir or do a debate or to ask for a promotion, whatever it is. Sometimes we need that shove, that challenge to take the risk, to make us discover our own strength. And so when we can discover our own strength, we build ourselves up, right? We become stronger. We become more faithful. We become more courageous to go out and do what we need to do. And the real sufficiency isn't from us anyway. Our real sufficiency comes from God. It's a matter of trusting God in the rush of life, navigating the alligators with faith, and realizing joy comes from giving, not from hoarding, right? When we stop living in fear of not having enough, we can start living in the freedom of generosity. So don't fear the push. Sometimes God allows us to be shoved into hard situations to reveal a courage we never knew we had. And so remember this when you feel like sufficiency isn't just about money. True security comes from trusting God and aligning your priorities with His priorities so we can choose to give generously and love freely because the reward isn't just financial. We also get joy and peace. So, I mean, I could go on forever and ever and talk about all the different miracles. I was going to talk about the lifeline of when my dad needed money for school and anonymously the amount of money came at the right time and prayer and all that stuff. But get the book, The 100 Air. It's on Amazon. It's a good read.
I agree with Mom.
Did you come to say something or you just?
I know. I just I agree with you.
Oh, you agree with me. We'll see you next week. I hope you have a wonderful week. Don't be afraid to jump in the pool with the alligators. There may be a great reward on the other side. Don't do something that is going to be reckless and foolish, but sometimes that fear is in our own mind, and there's great rewards waiting on the other side. So thank you so much for being here, and have a blessed week.
Bye.
So,